نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه وأحبائه أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد: إنه يراكم هو وقبيله إنا جعلنا الشياطين أولياء للذين لا يؤمنون. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد معدن الجود والكرم وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. All praise be to Allah Azza wa Jal, who created this universe and that which is beyond this universe, and distributed categories of creation. A manufacturer knows its product better than the consumer. And Allah, as the manufacturer of this universe, has knowledge of every facet of creation. But when it came to superiority, when it came to greatness, when it came to the utmost nobility, this title or this label was given to one creation, and the name of that creation is the human being. Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We created insan as the best. So if you look at the history of this universe, you will see all forms of creation, but the best of creation is the human being. More better than jinns, better than angels, better than animals, better than all life forms. Why? Of course, the human being has to have something that is present in him or her that is not present in the rest of creation. That, of course, is a different subject for a different day, as to why we are superior, what is within us that gives us the superiority that we have in the kingdom of Allah Azza wa Jal. But this foundation should be the basis for us to start a short inquiry into our relationship with jinns and ultimately jadoo. The starting point is that humans don't understand a fundamental principle. And that principle is that humans are more powerful than jinns. On the face of it, there are many animals that have better physical qualities than human beings. And I don't need to go into detail. You know, externally, there are many animals that have greater faculties than the human being. But despite the greater or the greatness of those faculties, the human being is still superior. Likewise, the jinn has certain capabilities. Despite those capabilities, the human being is still superior. Of course, why the human being is superior, this is a different subject for a different day. But certainly from the Quran, we can establish that the human being is more superior than a jinn. This is a common stereotype that we assume that jinns are more powerful, and we base that assumption on the fact that they are able to do that which we cannot ordinarily do. But as a starting point from the Quran, because our understanding of everything should ultimately revolve around the Quran and Sunnah. So the starting point is humans are more powerful than jinns. But certain capabilities that jinns have appear to be more sophisticated than humans. I'm going to come on to that. But if you look at a comparison between the human race and the race of jinns, jinns predate dinosaurs. They predate all life forms on this earth. When Allah Azza wa Jal created this earth, the first inhabitants of this earth were jinns. And those jinns, they populated this earth in the same manner as human beings. They have communities, they have cultures, they have families, they have societies, they have politics, they have laws, they have socialization, they have problems, in as much as the same as the human race. They have physical problems, well, physical to them. They have psychological problems. They have the resolve to want to learn more knowledge. And there are good jinns and there are bad jinns. So exactly the way the human race is, the jinns are a mirror reflection of what the human race is. So you'll find good jinns and bad jinns. Of course, the average expectancy, life expectancy of a jinn is far more than that of a human. The human life expectancy has degenerated over the course of the previous centuries on account of the ecological degeneration and the exposure of man to a more contaminated environment. But jinns do not thrive on the same environment as us, as in they don't require oxygen, so contaminated oxygen or lack of oxygen supply doesn't affect their life as it affects ours. But on average, their lifespan is well over 1,000 years. They procreate, of course, they procreate at a larger scale. They marry, they have children, they have families, and they also eventually die. But before going into understanding jinns a bit more, because the understanding of the jinn underpins our understanding of jadoo. Of course, jadoo is directly related to jinns, so if you don't understand jinns, it's very difficult to understand jadoo. I use the word jadoo because that's commonly what is used in our language, but the Arabic word is actually sihr. That's the Quranic word. So if you do a Quranic search, you won't find the word jadoo in the Quran because jadoo is not an Arabic word. The Arabic word is sihr. Sihr. And the one who does it is called a sahir. So this is a very Quranic concept, the concept of jadoo. But before we just dip into that, let's just understand a bit about jinns. Jinns do not generally interfere with human existence. They have their own hierarchical structures, and their hierarchical structures are similar to humans. Like amongst humans, you have pious humans who excel. Likewise, you have jinns who excel on account of their piety. Of course, there are, the excelling of jinns because they have a closer exposure to angels. Therefore, angels regulate jinns far more directly than angels regulate humans. So angels regulate us, but we do not see them. But when angels regulate jinns, jinns actually see them and are afraid of angels. But jinns generally, they keep themselves to themselves. They don't mix with human society. One amongst them, who is quite renowned in the Quran, was a jinn called Azazil. He was excelled in his rank on account of his knowledge and piety. I must say it was a combination of knowledge and piety. It wasn't just knowledge, it was his piety and his knowledge. According to some narration, 70,000 years of piety that he had displayed in the majesty of Allah. And on account of that worship and knowledge, angels used to study from him. So he was mu'allimul malaika. So you can imagine, jinns can excel, and likewise humans excel. Many great ulama had students who were jinns. This is not a rare occurrence. So jinns used to come and learn from Azazil, and angels used to come in his mehfil, in his gathering also, to learn from him. He was raised to such a high rank that he was given rank amongst angels. That's how superior his rank was. He was actually given official duty amongst the rank of angels. So typically the management and regulation of Jannah and Jahannam was in the hands of angels. But because of his rank, he was given the status of performing jobs which angels perform. And that's why he was given the keys to Jahannam. And the angel who has the keys of Jannah, his name is Ridwan. And Azazil had the keys to Jahannam. So you can imagine, he was given such a high profile on account of his piety. Likewise, when Allah said, فَاسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ, when we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam, فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسِ, they all prostrate except for Iblis. So Iblis could have said, excuse me, the order was for angels, it wasn't for jinns. So he could have excluded himself by that. But the reality is, by being amongst them, he was treated and governed by the same laws that applied to angels. Can you imagine his rank? Hazrat Shah Waliullah Muhaddis Dehelvi Rahmatullah alayh, this is a separate subject, but just to sort of add a bit of flavor to this, he says when awliya are living, they are given sometimes a status in the divine administration. I'm sure you've heard of these terms, the Ghaus, the Qutab, the Abdal, and the Akhyar, Ahbab. There are different ranks amongst the awliya. But he says that some awliya actually continue to perform their duties even in barzakh, in their graves. Hazrat Shah Waliullah Muhaddis Dehelvi has written extensively on this, and of course this is another subject for another day. But for now we can see that Azazil could have quite simply said, right, carry on, you were given the order, I'm not going to prostrate. But no, his denial of prostration wasn't because he wasn't a jinn. He knew that by being amongst the angels he is susceptible to the same order. And the Quran is very equivocal that Shaitan, or Azazil as he was then known, was not an angel. The Quran says, وَكَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ, he was from the jinn. فَفَسَكَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ, and then he denied his Lord. Then when he denied his Lord, Allah says, and this is the interesting bit. So we established, although he wasn't an angel, by being that mixed up amongst the angels, he was treated like the angels and he was regulated like the angels. You know, like the Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa min." He who imitates a nation becomes like them. Likewise, he was so intertwined in the angelic world that their orders applied to him. But here's the interesting point. The Quran says, "Aba wastakbara wa kana min al-kafirin." He was proud and he was disobedient. Wa kana min al-kafirin, and became from the kafirin. We often ascribe evil in its origin to shaitan. Correct? We often say evil, shaitan. It almost is synonymous, isn't it? We say evil, shaitan. But Allah says he became disobedient and was proud and became from amongst the kafirin. So it means there were kafirin before. Kafirin in Arabic is Jummah, is plural, isn't it? So he became from amongst the kafirin. So if I say I became South African, it means there are South Africans already. Just by my saying I became South African national doesn't mean I'm the first national. It means there are many South African nationals. So wakana minal kafirin, he became from the kafirin. So it means there were kafirs before shaitan. Who were those kafirs? They were jinnat. And those jinnat used to live on this earth, and some mufassirin say that maybe because of those jinns that the angels projected that if these guys have been messing around on the earth, then humans will also be messing around. Anyway, different subject. So jinns, in essence, they inhabited the earth, they keep themselves to themselves, they don't live ordinarily amongst humans. They have no desire to live amongst humans. However, on the off chance where humans have gone and built in a population where jinns live, jinns normally vacate that area. Unless, of course, you have a stubborn jinn who says, "Bugger you, I'm going to stay here." And then he stays. And normally, even if they stay, they don't disturb humans. They cohabit, they have their own culture. Because they're predators, they have a certain priority. What is the first namaz in the day? You see, we often say Fajr, but actually the first namaz in the day is Maghrib. Because the Islamic day starts on Maghrib. Why? Because our morning is Fajr. The morning of the jinns is Maghrib. Yeah. The morning of the jinns is Maghrib. Because they existed before us, Islamic law adopted their day and night in priority to our day and night. So therefore, the first salah of the day is Maghrib. Anyway, so they have certain priorities. In Islamic law, you would have been told by your learned scholars that it is often said, do not urinate under a tree. Why? Because typically a tree, and especially if it's an old tree, and especially if it's out of the normal course, I'm not talking about a tree that humans grow, like you have a house and you grow a tree, not those kind of trees, but trees that are very old, that have been there for a long time. The possibility that a jinn could be living under there is very high, so don't urinate under a tree. So, and that's why in Islamic law it's forbidden to urinate under a tree, and there are other reasons. Now, there are three kinds of jinns. There's jinns who are airborne. They have the ability to fly. Their ability to fly was restricted only recently up to the Prophet ﷺ. They were able to transcend the heavens. But at a certain juncture, the angels then formed a guard and they could not go beyond the first heaven. That is why the Prophet ﷺ said that there are certain jinns that they go all the way to the first heaven, they eavesdrop, the angels talk about what's going to be happening in your life. So for example, what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month. So then they eavesdrop and they come back down. The journey is so far that in transit they forget certain things, but they remember certain things. It's like you. Today in Jummah, you'll remember certain things and you'll forget certain things. It's what happens. It's a human, it's a natural instinct. So jinns in their journey will forget something, but they will remember certain things. That which they will remember, they will often communicate to people who they have access to. And it is assumed that those people have powers, but actually those powers are partly accurate, partly inaccurate because of the fact that they have been advised by jinns. So these psychics and mediums who claim that they speak to spirits and who claim that they speak to ghosts is actually speaking to jinns. Now, the most easily accessible jinn is the jinn that the Prophet ﷺ talked about, called in the Quranic and Hadith literature, Hamzad. Everyone in this audience who is sat here doesn't need to worry when I'm about to say this, that we are all possessed by jinns. And you don't need any treatment for that. When we were born, at our birth, there was a jinn that was born with us, and the name of that jinn is the Hamzad. If you've ever seen yourself in your dream, that's not you looking in a mirror, that's you looking at your Hamzad. Your Hamzad is a jinn who pays allegiance to shaitan. His duty, all his life, is to misguide you, and he reports every evening to shaitan and to the other shayateen. So we have interaction with jinns on a daily basis. You have interaction with jinns, so you don't have to worry. But the nature of, and there's good jinns also, there's, and they interact with us. They can come in human form. Anyway, so the first form of jinn is the ones that travel. They are airborne. The second kind of jinn is those that don't travel. They are permanently situated on the earth. Typically their physique is, although they don't come in a physique like us, their physique is that either they are very short and fat, or that they are very tall and thin. And these jinns, they inhabit the earth, they don't have any special powers, but they just live in very deserted and abandoned areas, and they keep themselves to themselves. There's a third species amongst jinns, and they have the ability to be airborne, and they have the ability to walk on the earth, but they have an added ability, and that is that they can come in physical form. So they can typically come in a human form. The best example of this, without quoting the full hadith, is when Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu was given the duty to guard the stock. I'm sure you've heard this hadith. He was given the duty to guard, this is a hadith in Bukhari, you may want to look it up. He was given the duty to guard the stock. So shaitan came in human form, and Abu Huraira caught him, trying to steal. Of course, why would shaitan come in human form and then get caught? This is a different subject for a different day. But the point is, Abu Huraira caught him. In the end, the Prophet ﷺ said that was shaitan. He came in human form. So the hadith tells us that jinns can come in human form. Of course, when they come in human form, it's very difficult to distinguish. There are a few telltale signs, of course, but not something which I can authoritatively say on the pulpit. The point is, they can come in human form, and they can also come in animalistic form, and in animal form. Typically, the animals that they are most drawn towards are reptilian animals. So the most popular reptile that they prefer to come in is the snake. So the snake is a companion once came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I went home and on my bed there was a snake. And this hadith is in Muwatta of Imam Malik, if you want to check it out. So he said, I saw it on my bed and I killed it. The Prophet ﷺ said, do not kill the snakes of Medina Munawwara. Why? Because most of them are jinns. They come in Medina Munawwara to pay their respects to, of course, the city of Rasul ﷺ. So they come in typically snake form, and when they come in snake form, they will not come to harm humans. So if you see a snake harming you, you cannot assume what it's a jinn. They will only come in human form for certain objectives that are relevant to them. So they typically come in snake form, but they can also put this idea of coming into a body, what they call hulul. I know some people find it difficult to believe how jinn can come into your body. Well, I was saying last night, two souls can exist in one body. How? A pregnant woman. She's pregnant, she has a child in her, she has her own soul, and she has the soul of a child. Two souls in one body. Another example from hadith. The Prophet ﷺ was walking out of Makkah Mukarramah one day, and he saw a person with a sword in his hand and blood on his sword. And he said to the Prophet ﷺ, As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Rasulullah, As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Habiballah. Prophet ﷺ said, who are you? He said, I am a jinn and I am your ummati. He said, how? He said, where have you just come from? There was a statue in the Kaaba, Hubul. I'm sure you've heard the name of Hubul. And Hubul used to talk. And the mushrikeen used to say, see, our God is a genuine God. He talks. But actually, there was a certain jinn who used to come into the statue of Hubul and he used to talk. It wasn't the statue itself. By the way, statues themselves, seers, they understanders, they observers, they have an intellect. That's why on the Day of Judgment, when Allah will talk to these murtis, these statues, and He will say, يَوْمَ يَحْشُرُهُمْ وَمَا يَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ Surah Furqan, Allah says, أَنْتُمْ أَدْلَلْتُمْ عِبَادِي هَؤُلَاءِ أَمْ هُمْ دَلُّ السَّبِيلِ O statues, did you misguide my servants to come and worship you? And the statues will say, قَالُوا سُبْحَانَكَ Ya Allah, Subhan, you are Subhan. مَا كَانَ يَنْبَغِي لَنَا أَن نَتَّخِذَ مِن دُونِكَ مِنْ أَوْلِيَاءَ It's not befitting us to choose anyone other than you, O Allah. But, and look how intelligent stones are. These murtis, well, not just murtis, stones. But it says, وَلَكِنْ مَتَّعْتَهُمْ وَآبَاؤُهُمْ حَتَّى نَسُوا الذِّكْرَ وَكَانُوا قَوْمًا بُورًا You, O Allah, gave them so much luxury in the dunya that they forgot you. We observe that, not only them, and their forefathers, you gave them so much luxury, they forgot you. وَكَانُوا قَوْمًا بُورًا So statues themselves are not mushrik, they understand Allah. But sometimes a jinn can come into a statue like they did with Hubul. So the mushrikeens challenged the Prophet ﷺ and said, see, our statue talks, our God talks. So the Prophet ﷺ organized a debate. He said, okay, let's come and I'll see whether it talks in my presence. So when the Prophet ﷺ came in front of Hubul and he said, Qul, talk, there was no conversation. There was a dead, the stone was dead. Anyway, when the mushrikeen were humiliated, when they left, this person who had blood on his sword said, Ya Rasulullah, I am your ummati. I knew the jinn who comes into Hubul. And before he was able to come into Hubul, I, with this sword, killed him. This is his blood on this sword. So I have, showed my loyalty to you. So jinns can come in human form. Now, so just to come on to Jadoo, time is passing by. Just as a brief synopsis, there are three kinds of knowledges that you must be aware of. One is which we call typically Jadoo. What is Jadoo? What is the definition of Jadoo? The definition of Jadoo is when you employ satanic jinns. When I mean satanic jinns, jinns who are either the progeny of Shaitan or who are related to him, who are friends to him. Satanic jinns, when you employ them to do work, good or bad. You could employ them to do good or bad. But typically they will be more lured if you got them to do bad. They won't be excited if you told them to do your day's labor for you. They will be more happier if you said, go and cause this person harm. Why? The Quran says, Inna shayateena, the preceding verses, Innahu yarakum, Iblis sees you, huwa wa qabiluhu, him and his progeny. Min haysu la tarawnahum, where you cannot see them. Inna shayateena, the shayateen, inna ja'alna shayateena, we made the shayateen awliya'a, friends, lilladhina la yu'minun. Those people who don't believe in Allah, they are friends of these shayateen. So those people who disbelieve, when they call upon shaitan as their deity, shaitan responds to them and helps them. So the principle that we need to understand is anyone who is associated to Jadoo, any form of it, commits the act of kufr. He goes out of the fold of Islam. And I must make a point here that it's quite common in our community that we blame each other for Jadoo. We say, this person did Jadoo. We have no evidence, but we just assume that this person did Jadoo. It is like saying this person committed kufr. And you know what the rule of kufr is? If you call your Muslim brother a kafir, what is the rule? Only one of you remain a mu'min. If he is a kafir, you will remain a mu'min. If he isn't a kafir and you have called him a kafir, what happens? it bounces back on you. So be careful next time you say, this person does jadoo. There's a very common problem in our community. We blame each other just like that, and we don't realize the theological connotations of that. Be careful before you blame someone. So when you employ shayateen or invoke their name, you are committing shirk. They will come to you and they will help you. They will not be motivated by money. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Nuri Ilm. Nuri Ilm is where you recite verses of the Quran and certain selected ahadith which are prescribed by the Quran or by the Prophet ﷺ. Those verses, they are in the form of dua. And when you pray to Allah, Allah then designates angels to come and help you. Because angels are made of light, that's why we call this knowledge Nuri Ilm. From Nur, angels are made from light. A typical example for you, Ayatul Kursi. When you read Ayatul Kursi, a certain group of angels who are specific to Ayatul Kursi come down and they assist you. So Nuri Ilm is the usage of Quranic verses or ahadith that are used as a form of dua to Allah, not to the angels. You actually do dua to Allah and there is ajr in that. I have noticed that some people, actually I'll mention this point just after the next point. In the middle, you've got Nuri and you've got Nari. In the middle, you've got a knowledge called Sifli. Sifli knowledge is that knowledge where you use jinns, not satanic jinns, but you use them in the same way that you use humans. So you say, if I was to give you a ton of bricks, this is what the price is going to be. So you are transacting with those jinns. So there are certain people who transact with jinns. They are called amil. The technical word is amil. So they transact with jinns and they say, okay, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. So they get jinns to do their work. Typically, magicians, there are two kinds of magicians. One that are illusionists, that use the art of illusion. That in Arabic is called istidraj. And you can get to the bottom of that because scientifically, istidraj can be knocked down. But there's another form of magic, and there's an entertainment magic, in which they use jinns. And those jinns are not necessarily satanic jinns. Those jinns are there because they are at your service. You have controlled them and they will do what you say. It's a very dangerous game. So when ta'weez are written, if the ta'weez is a statement that proclaims worship to shaitan, that will be jadoo. You are instructing jinns through that ta'weez or through reading for those jinns to come. If the ta'weez has verses of the Quran on, you are effectively doing dua to Allah and angels will come. But if you are using sifli knowledge, which in Sharia is not haram, but it is not desirable because jinns are made from fire. You play with fire, you're going to get your fingers burned. Today, if not tomorrow, one time you are going to get your fingers burned. So sifli knowledge is commonly used by all of these people who come, typically I've seen from, it's very hot in the subcontinent, they say every problem you have, we will solve it through a ta'weez. And the sales pitch is that your life will forever be evergreen and successful subject to this ta'weez. I mean, there was a guy in England who came and he had a ta'weez which he advertised in the local newspaper. He says, if you use my ta'weez and you put it in your car and you speed, the robot won't flash. You know, the camera won't flash. And you know who came to him the first? He had a whole line of people. You know who the first people to line up outside? Taxi drivers. Because they all get flashed. Anyway, so he had 500 pounds of ta'weez. I mean, that's big money. No one knew what he was writing. You know, scribbling anything, just writing it. And people were buying it, blindly. And for a certain period of time, it worked. 500, I don't know how many rands that is. But anyway, one day, one taxi driver, the camera flashed him and he got a penalty through the door. So he went back to this guy, knocked on the door and said, excuse me, what's going on? You said the camera won't flash. What's happening here? I want my money back. 500 pounds, a lot of money here. So he said, come my son, sit down. Let me look into this. Let me look into this for you. So he closed his eyes for 5 minutes, making a sucker out of him basically. So he closed his eyes. He said, look, my ta'weez was working, but the problem is someone's done jadoo on your car. He said, jadoo on my car? He said, yeah. He said, what's it going to take to fix that? He says, £500. So they prey on the vulnerability of people who are obsessed with dunya. But the mu'min is not obsessed with dunya. The mu'min knows, Ma asaba min musibatin illa bi iznillah. No problem can come to you without the permission of Allah. Ultimately, the lowest of the low, the highest of the high, all your problems, if you refer to Allah and you say, oh Allah, I beseech you, I look at you, you create circumstances. Allah can create any circumstances to alleviate you from that. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us how to alleviate ourselves from the impact of jinnat. Sifli knowledge, because it's based on transaction, that's why a lot of these people who come from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they charge a lot of money and they don't declare it to the taxman, by the way. I know a guy in England, he got caught, so then he's had to start charging VAT on his taweez. Anyway, the point is, if you've got to pay your taxes, the point is that because it's transactional, they therefore use their relationship with jinns to help humans. That is not something that has been prescribed either by the Prophet ﷺ, that was used by the Sahaba, Tabi'in, 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 or by the awliya, because of course they are all models for us. In the society we live in today, everything that goes wrong in our life, we say jadoo. It's the easiest thing, isn't it? And then we look for the person that we hate the most and we say, he's probably responsible, or she's probably responsible. And this creates so much friction in our community. And then along comes Charlie Chaplin, who says, you know all these problems that you've got in your jadoo. Everything that goes wrong in you. 1 o'clock in the morning, this guy phones me up. 1 a.m. in the morning, this guy phones me up. And I could hear noise behind him. He's on the motorway, on the freeway. And he says, Sheikh, I've broken down. I said, so? What are you calling me for? He says, Sheikh, I've got 1% battery left. Please, I'm calling you. I said, listen, you shouldn't be calling me. You should be calling the AA. He said, but no, you don't understand. My tires burst. I said, I'm 200 miles away from you. What can I do for you? He says, no, you need to look into this. Someone's done jadoo on my car, that my tires burst. It wouldn't occur to him that the tread on his tire was low, but everything has to be referred back to jadoo. And people who are involved in this from a commercial perspective, they will lure you into thinking that every problem you have is related to this. The greatest weapon that you and me have, which we have lost a link with, is the weapon of dua. If we do dua, there is no more powerful force than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the greatest of greatest jadoo can be alleviated through the power of dua. The conclusion of my lecture is this. We live in a world where there's a lot of superstition that's going on. Most of the superstition is wrong. Some of the superstition is actually based on sound thinking, which can find its origin in the Quran and Sunnah. I don't know if you recall, the elders will recall this. Your elders used to say to the young children, don't leave the house after Maghrib. Don't leave the house. They used to tell young girls who are not married not to wear perfume or makeup before marriage. The reasoning behind that wasn't just because they were being harsh unnecessarily. The reasoning was behind that is when an unmarried girl walks out, or a child walks out after hours, remember, after Maghrib, that is their morning, our night. So when they walk out, they are exposed. Of course, if they have their adults in their company, they are less exposed. But if an unmarried girl walks out, she is more prone to being attacked by a jinn. When I mean attacked, I don't mean attacked the way humans fall in love with humans. Jinns also fall in love with humans, and inter-jinn and human marriages are possible, by the way, but inshallah we'll talk about this some other day. I'm sure you'll be very interested to know that. I'm sure you will be, inshallah, maybe not the sisters. But the point is that this inter-jinn and marriage relationship does take place, but when a jinn sees a human who they like, they become obsessed with that person and they begin to disturb that person. That is why you're buzurg. So this isn't superstition. Sometimes certain things have been given to protect us from jinnat. Likewise, not cutting trees or plants at night. This is not something that is recommended. The conclusion of my lecture is this. This world of jinns and jadoo has a lot of stereotype around it. It has a lot of superstition around it. My invitation to you in today's Jummah is that we should go back to the Quran and Sunnah and start to understand the reality of jinns from the Quran and Sunnah, number one, and understand Jadoo, its operation, how we can combat it. And when we start to understand these two things, we will start to realize that A, we are powerful, as I said in the beginning of my lecture, we are the most powerful species. Number two, our greatest weapon is the weapon of dua. As long as we stick to this dua, and as long as we are steadfast in that, no jadoo in the world can affect us without Allah's will. May Allah allow you and me to understand this more from the Quran and Sunnah. My apologies for transcending time. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ.
تبسم 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 وخل الهموم وخل الغموم وخل الضجر ولا تبتئس من صروف الزمان ولا تشتكي من طعون البشر.